Hello, friends. It's me, Rob, here once more. Didn't go out and get a coffee this time. I settled for one of my wife's frappuccinos from Starbucks, but it works for coffee for a little chat. Nothing as serious as the last chat because talking about things like the rotten wood that sometimes infests the beautiful verdant tree that is any given hobby or collection of people. You're going to have people who are going to do horrible things, and while it's important for justice for those who are hurt and preventing terrible things from happening, it's important to recognize these things do happen, and it's an unpleasant conversation every time. We wish that these kind of things didn't happen. We wish that there weren't bad actors in the things that we care about and enjoy, but there are, and so we have to kind of move forward. So that's why the last one was a little negative. But unfortunately, my game space is a little messy, and that's where we are today. So yeah, let's chat. For the most part, what I kind of thought about talking about today relates to something that happened to me. I've been having kind of a tumultuous role-playing experience lately. No, not here in my game space. I am drawing to a close my Warhammer 40,000 game, which is going well. It's got about 3 more sessions worth of play. And then we're moving on. One of my players is picking up a game, so I'm excited. Expect to see a character witness for 5th edition D&D as I make my character. And I'm thinking it's probably beyond due that I do some Omnis Critic videos for people who are curious about 5th edition. I still see, even though so many people are playing 5th edition, a lot of people who have older versions of the game are curious about, what's different, what's new, what is this game? Is it worth getting into? I keep finding people who are like, okay, sell me on it. Well, it's the hot new game that everyone is playing. It addresses a lot of things and meets a lot of people's criteria for a very good game. And it's the kind of thing that, critical works are oftentimes drowned out by emotion. And that's a shame because I think it's a good game that stands on its own. But it should get a proper critical review, so we'll have to work on that. Fortunately, I happen to know a beret-clad critic who could give it a fair shake. The one thing about that is that you can't just do one video because it comes in many parts. If I was going to do a critique on 5th edition, I realistically would have to do one on the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, probably the Monster Manual, and then there would be honest critics for all of the Adventure Path books, all the hardcover books that basically have worked to expand out the world in a way that it usually took source books and modules together. Now it's a lot more of these hardbound books that have adventures in them, but also have new races and new class options and things like that. Books like Xanathar's Guide to Everything are excellent for giving you a sense of more options and freedom without adding on to the adventures and modules. And other ones like the Tales of the Yawning Portal give you the adventures without all the extra kibble. But honestly, I thought it was a refreshing way of going forward and really getting people to buy all of these different expansions because we were starving for more content. And different ones are different quality. It's good to know which ones are the good ones and which ones are only mediocre. I don't think I've seen anything that qualifies as bad yet out of 5th edition, at least not from the actual 5th edition from Wizards of the Coast. Some of the other stuff out there ranges from extremely good to sketchy and niche, but it is what it is. I like to get in more critical works. And if any of you have anything you want me to review, let's certainly look into it. I'm already going to be doing a character witness for 5th edition Talislanta because I had a subscriber ask me to. Unfortunately, that's going to be one of the topics that I'm about to get into here. Some of that has to deal with gaming responsibilities and things like that. So I said I've had kind of a tumultuous experience. My normal group, not so much. However, I've been playing a couple of games online. Online is a great resource for those of you who don't have groups or can't play as often as you like to within the constraints of your time and so on. Either playing on something where you're playing virtually face-to-face with other people on a virtual tabletop like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds, or through the various mediums that have always been available as long as the internet has basically been a thing. Play by forum, play by post, even play by email if you really want to get old school, but honestly there are too many options there that really requiring that is... I've been pretty impressed with Discord, with its ability to import bots and a forum setting that you can privatize and own. It's a good idea. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be setting up a play-by-post on my Discord server, which I really haven't announced, I just set it up, but it's the Lair of Omnisci on Discord. And when I'm ready to start rolling on it, and I'm going to make regular times when I'm available to give you, my subscribers, access to me for anything that you'd like to talk about or ask for, so on and so forth. That's something that I very much like to bring into the community. I think it's a good thing to have access to. And like I said, I want to make myself as available to anybody who cares about the kind of things I care about as possible. But I was going to play in a game of Talislanta that a friend of mine, an acquaintance that I had made on Facebook, and was, it was really, working. He was, we talked, chatted quite a bit. We shared a similar sense of humor and so on and so forth. It was going well. He invited me to play in his game, and I was flattered. There's a special relationship that goes on between a game master and a player. For a game master, basically you are an author waiting for other people's characters to come in and touch your story, in a lot of cases. So I was flattered and accepted. So I made up a character. If you've seen my character witness on 4th edition Talislanta, that was the character that I made, little Zaltique, and I enjoyed it. I think Talislanta's got some interesting things going for it. Again, one of these days I'll do a critical review on it. But if you saw my character witness, it was a straightforward effort, and it netted me what I thought was a fairly solid, versatile character. When it came time to play, the Game Master flaked the first week. The other player that he had in mind fell through, scheduling got messed up, didn't happen. The next week, I showed up. So did he. Got into Roll20, about a half an hour late, but we got there. And I started to unfold the world of Talislanta, which basically was reading from the book and describing a little detail here and there about a travel my character would have taken from his homeland east, just following the road, really. He described various places, what some of the countries were like, much of which I had already known about because I did do some reading, so I knew kind of what the lands and the character of the peoples were like. So it was basically a travelogue. Eventually, after about an hour of this, I'm like, are we going to do something? And he whipped up an encounter where my character was gambling in some nameless tavern in a town. I don't even know if I could put it on the map anymore. It just didn't have anything to really remember it by. And we had a very simple encounter where my character was gambling with 3 others. One of them was drunk. I overcame him with cleverness, jerking the table out so he knocked himself unconscious. Stole his daggers too. My character is kind of a thief. But I disarmed him and nobody questioned that I took his daggers. Didn't really get me anything, and again, there was no bite to it. He clearly didn't have anything in mind. It was just kind of wander around till something came to him. So that was unfortunate, and that was all we played. I made one roll for the whole thing. Then the next session came through, and we had another player. And so I chatted with him for a little bit. We waited for the Game Master to show up. The Game Master showed up. Nope, we're not playing. His only explanation was life happens. And I didn't know what to say. He even, just before this happened, he sent me stats for my character's steed, a Greymane. And that was it. Poof. After that, he shut down the game. It's no longer on Roll20. And he hasn't said anything to me. And the last thing I sent him is, how can I have any faith in your game? If you're going to fold up without any explanation, there's nothing here. And I think he just realized he wasn't ready to run a game. But honestly, I don't know. It's the Phantom game. It's, Schrodinger's game. I'm not sure if it really existed or if it was just in his mind or my mind, or I have no proof or evidence other than a darn sexy character. If I ever get a chance to play Talislantic again, I'd like to play Zeltique. I thought he had promise, especially if I got in with a group. Would have been cool. So, yeah, that didn't happen. And so I got into another online game run by a friend of mine, which was cool. And it's going a little slowly because it's very well narrated. He's a good storyteller, and he pads in a lot of detail. He wants a lot of role play. He wants a lot of communication between NPCs and the player characters. And this is an interesting thing for those of you who've ever done any kind of play-by-post. He doesn't have a communal story thread. He sends us what happens, what our characters see and hear, and invites us to comment, add thoughts, and what have you. But then he may give somebody else, even if their character is present at the same place, different information, because different people have different levels of perception, cares and interests, things they might catch. So your character is just getting the perspective of your character, not sharing everybody else's. It's a novel approach, a lot of effort. Really commend him for it. It's a champion job. And so we were playing, and I wanted to get into the story, and I was getting impatient because I was just spending my time talking to NPCs, and I hadn't met another player character, and about a week had gone by, and we kind of had a little falling out. Well, not a misunderstanding, just a difference in feeling on how things should have gone. And it all got cleared up. I sent a video saying, this is my feelings on it. Ball's in your court, but this isn't good for me, and I want to know, what you think, we can do from here. And, we discussed it like grown adults. And he acknowledged there were some things that he could do differently. And I said that I would try to, add more narration and pay more attention to the non-player characters and treat them a little bit more civilly. Although, it wasn't from just fireballing people at random. It was from, okay, you've told me your bit of information. I want to move on to the next thing rather than go through a long, fully fleshed out dialogue, as opposed to something that any writer would just cover in. They meet, the dialogue that's pertinent to the story takes place, and then just sum it up as they parted ways, and so on and so forth. Didn't seem too excessive, but the Game Master didn't like that initially, but we talked it over, and everything's cool now, which is great, because he's a great guy, and I'm glad to be playing in his game. It sounds like it's going to be very interesting. I'm playing a wizard! Yeah. This is going to actually enable me to not be tempted to play a wizard for the tabletop 5th edition game I'm going to be playing after my Warhammer game is done. I think I'm going to go back to playing a cleric like I did for my very first edition character. See what the new clerics are like. Funny enough, I only had one cleric play in my 5th edition game so far. Despite the fact that they're a little different, only one person's actually stepped up to play a cleric. And he played him as kind of your typical cleric, honestly. Lots of buffing, some healing, and heavy armor, and a warhammer, and a shield, and he was a dwarf. He was a dwarf of the dwarves, cleric of Clangeddon Silverbeard. He was involved in a total party kill and is no longer with the group. So he didn't have the longest career. I hope to have a bit longer of a career, trying out a different facet of a cleric, a different angle, different domain, different outlook, and see how that goes. I'm really kind of looking forward to it. But my character for the play-by-post, I am playing, stop me if you've heard this before, Lord Cadrian de Flynn. A young wizard, a young Cadrian de Flynn, not my older character from the Ask the Wizard series. I realize that I'm in danger of kind of hitting a creative rut with that, but honestly I really like the character, and I kind of wanted to explore it in role-playing settings, so that's why I'm doing it. It also seemed to fit the needs of the group, because the group already has a bard, had a rogue, pair of fighters, and a sorcerer, but a sorcerer who is a divine soul, so more into healing than blasting everything in sight. So it's a different take, and I look forward to playing the wizard. I love my wizards. So that's how things are going in my role-playing front. But the moral I would take out of this, because I like to have a little moral in when I have these conversations, is communication. Communication is so important. It's really the cornerstone that keeps games alive. If the game master doesn't communicate with the players, you run the risk of the players being lost or stumbling over things that are evident to the game master. But when that happens, you have friction, you have confusion, you have players who don't trust the game master anymore. And if you don't have trust, you're going to be hard-pressed to keep your players bought in your world. It's just how that runs. If your players aren't communicating with the game master may think everything is hunky-dory while the players are ready to burn the campaign down around his ears. With just a little communication, a game master can more effectively tailor a game to his players. And, that just goes double when you start talking about things like, scheduling, and, you have misunderstandings. If there's some reason that you can't show up for a game, either as a player or as a game master, it behooves you, out of the courtesy of being in a group, at the earliest possible time to let everyone know, so that they can change their plans and do something else, or maybe get together for their own game, or there's lots of options. Telling your game master as a player if you're not going to be there is, tantamount to letting the game master decide, is the loss of your character going to, affect how I can run the game? Or, in some cases, and I know some groups do this, who should I have play your character? I don't prefer that. I prefer to take the character out of the situation, but I realize that's not fair or realistic for some settings. Fortunately, as a game master, I'm more than savvy enough to tone down encounters that I don't have enough players for, or let them take on encounters as written for something I would normally have punched up for the game with the players that I have at full strength. So it doesn't terribly ruin a game for me if a person is missing here, even a relatively key person. It's just, there's going to be times when you've built up something, if that person isn't there, you may have to figure out a way to move around it and possibly preserve it for when that player can come back. And if you can't preserve it, well, there isn't really a price on our creativity for our hobby, is there? I mean, time spent well in creating isn't time wasted ever, even if it doesn't bear the full fruit you were hoping for. At least it keeps your mind working and lets you make something beautiful, even if it doesn't reach the audience that you were hoping it would. Idle philosophy, true, but it just goes to point that communication's important. If my game master for the Taoslanta game had just told me, I don't have a campaign in mind, I don't have a story, I just want to take your character and run around through the world, I'd have been fine, but fairly disappointed. I believe stories, and good ones, have a beginning, a middle, and an end, not just kind of wandering and taking you to wherever somebody's imagination leads you. I understand that any story basically is a person conceptualizing a beginning, middle, and end, challenges along the way, but when you have that as something interactive, you want something to present to people, and if you're not prepared, you'd really better be good at ad-libbing and ad-libbing something concrete enough that they can come to grips with and look forward to and enjoy. And that clearly wasn't the case with that game. Likewise, with communication as a player, if you can't communicate up to the game master and say, I'm really not enjoying this aspect of your game. Can we do this differently? I didn't do that, and that led to some misunderstandings. Now, the game master did not communicate back to me and say, this is really bothering me, until, the actual friction occurred. Again, had we just communicated like adults, that wouldn't have happened. So ultimately, I'm going to end up doing a layer of Omnissiah or a layer of the Ominous Eye, I'm not sure which, on communication and why it's so important. But I'm giving you guys a little foretaste of it now. And honestly, I think that's one of the most important things with any gaming group. Anytime you're going to have moving pieces, if there's not one central person who's mandating everything, and these days that's really hard. I guess if you were, working for a game company and the boss is running the game, that's one thing. But that doesn't happen for most of us. So lives happen. What we do is only a game, and you really can't. Well, you probably shouldn't hold somebody's absence against them for legitimate reasons. If they keep blowing off your game, yeah, that's really frustrating. And I've had to let players go who couldn't commit to the game. That's because we were playing a fairly serious game that required continuous participation. And that's fine. The player understood it, and there's no heat between us. So that's what was on my mind today, and thought I'd share with you. Fire off another video. So I just did the Lair of the Omnissiah. I hope you all enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. It's a different perspective, a different character, and I'm not quite into it fully yet, so if it seemed a little rough, I apologize, but I'll keep working with that character. He's not going to go away anytime soon. On the other hand, Omnissiah is not going to be gone forever either. Just a short hiatus while I explore some other characters for a bit. But I can let you guys know that I am working towards some more constructive advice video lines coming up. I've got one, and obviously the 900-pound gorilla in the room is 5th edition D&D. I'm going to be slanting them towards Dungeons & Dragons unless any of you want to tell me otherwise and something else I should look into for you. Again, trying to hook you. You've got a taste. You're seeing this. This is only going to appear on the Facebook channel or on the YouTube channel unless somebody links it elsewhere. But as far as I'm concerned, this is an open invitation for any of you to direct what I make. But I'm going to be making some advice videos for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And I'll probably throw in some perspective on other editions too, because I have played everything from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 3.5, 4, and 5, and back me. So, I can give perspective, and I think it could be really useful because it's it's the hot thing in the room, you know. Everybody's talking about it, even if they're not playing it. They know it exists and that a lot of people are interested. Whether or not that brings their scorn, well, some people will never be happy with what is currently hot and cool. We have our share of hipsters and grognards and so on and so forth. God bless our community, but we are a fractious bunch. So I've got that coming up through this next week. I'll be making one of these advice videos. I will also be working on an Omnis Critic video. I have a work that I want to do a review for. I think it's a really good one to review. A little obscure, but I don't mind doing obscure videos because, I don't mind doing videos about obscure objects because, well, there's two major reasons. Number one, it's not the thing that everybody's already talking about. So if you're into things that are outside of the ordinary, hopefully I can catch some of that and bring it back. Some people make pretty good hay out of kind of obscure, sometimes foreign games or ones that are out of print and bring them back into the public collective. I've heard of some games coming out now that I'll never see in my home gaming store. Grim and Perilous, Zweihander, the Dark Eye. There's a lot of interesting games out there, but for a person with a limited amount of library space and access to local, if I talk about, say, Rollmaster, anybody can go to, I think it's available on DriveThruRPG last I looked, and you can at least download the rules and look at it if you're interested. When I do the character witness for Rollmaster, it's going to be in several parts. It's a rather lengthy process. But I'll do it because I think it's important that people who are interested in playing that game have some friendly voice out there who goes right alongside of them and makes a character and shows you how it's done. I think there's value in those videos. Even if I don't get a lot of views. I haven't done this for a lot of views. I've been doing it because I think you enjoy it. I enjoy it. And down the road sometime, it's going to be on YouTube. Even if I'm dead and gone, somebody can find my video and find some use into it. Makes me a little happier somewhere. But that is what's on my mind over a little coffee. I'm Rob, here with coffee. Don't forget, if this goes on as I plan it to, this weekend, daylight savings, unless you're in Arizona or Hawaii or not in the United States. I don't know what other places observe daylight savings time, but check your clocks if you are. I'm Rob. Thank you very much again for joining me, and I'll see you next time I decide to crawl in front of the internet. Farewell.